Hello, everyone, and welcome. We have just hit time, so I will get started. Massive thank you to those joining live. Today's session is all on muscle strength, growth, and that progress point. And the main reason we wanted to cover this was there's been some discussions in the socials around the different factors around muscle growth. I think it's always something that is a part of conversation, and obviously protein often gets a whole lot of attention as well. And so I thought I would take a different tact, and Mon had this idea as well, is going, how about we cover beyond the nutrition side, as where our place sits as nutritionists and dietitians in the space of improving muscle mass, but also seeing that strength gain, when to refer, all the different flags and all the different considerations of where our scope sits, but also where it can go beyond as well in terms of like that multi-faceted approach to improving someone's strength, muscle mass, and overall progress. And I guess the big thing is like, how often do we have clients that come in wanting to improve their strength or see progress or improvements in different areas in fitness? And you can kind of insert anything there, as well as muscle mass growth or improvements in strength. And they feel like they're doing the things, right? Like you go through their nutrition and you're like, it looks pretty good. Like, in this conversation, maybe they've come in and they're absolutely hitting their, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. They're consistent with their intake. They're doing all the things like spreading it out nice and evenly. They've got the timing right. The quality's great. What else could be going on? And this is what we're going to cover this session. So it's less about, the fundamentals of the nutrition side and more about how do we show up for that whole person, because people come and see us not just to pick up a program or a prescription or a meal plan and be told what to do. People come to us wanting to achieve something, to feel something, to progress in something. And that's what we need to pay attention to. And also, I think sometimes we feel pressure to give them everything all at once or give them all the answers. And then once they've got all the answers, they'll know what to do. But they're people, and people have barriers. They have different enablers. They have different pieces of understanding. And also, there's things that we can miss if we only focus on our one component, which is, say, the nutrition. And when it comes to muscle mass change, progress in strength, nutrition is absolutely essential, but it's not sufficient to achieve muscle mass gains. And I think most of us will know that when we kind of think it through, of like, okay, I can't just eat well and get stronger in terms of my muscle mass. There needs to be other factors. And it's multi-systems that we need to consider here, but also multifaceted in the way that we can bring on different experts and really collaborate within this system to get the most out of our time with clients, but also the clients get the most out of their relationship with us and who we might connect them to or what information we connect them on with as well. And our scope, it still sits in that assessment. It still sits in the care that we provide them, but it also sits in collaboration. And I think one piece that I'd love to see more and more in the space of health, well-being, sport, is how do we elevate all of our roles, including nutrition, to be a space where we're not in competition with each other. We are just here to be available to our clients and allow for client-centered care. So I think the first thing there is the ecosystem, right? Like, what is actually all the factors that play a part in muscle growth? And I think sometimes we focus a lot on the science. We've got the training stimulus, which is really, the creation of the demand and also the messenger to build, to get stronger. You're breaking down those muscle fibers to build them back up, and you're going to need that trigger for everything else. And you also have the nutrition, which provides the substrates to achieve all of those things, right? You've got the energy intake, the protein, the nutrients, and all the things that we'll also go through in a sec on the other factors you need to be considering when it comes to nutrition. We've got the recovery and the sleep. Honestly, I think this is a really critical piece that sometimes we gather information and knowledge about someone and we only see it with the lens of nutrition, of like, oh, they're fatigued, we need to do this. But how about we actually consider the whole person in that approach, and really ensure that we're also considering like the recovery, the sleep, and all those things. And we'll go through that as well. And the other thing that we need to make sure we are holding in our screening, our conversation, and also our ongoing discussions is all things sleep, hormonal health, to ensure that we've got that anabolic environment for the body. If strength and muscle gain are the goal, then the body's environment needs to be conducive to that. But also, we need to consider the whole person and where they're currently at with their stress in life, in sport, and all the other things that might be creating additional stress, including the training load. Um, the the final piece to that, I guess, the ecosystem, when we're thinking about all the different facets of enabling um, muscle mass, but also strength improvements, is also consistency. And the way I see consistency is, where are we in the enablers and also the barriers to someone being able to do this behavior consistently for a long time? What are the psychosocial factors that are going to influence that? Things like financial, environment, social, overall well-being, that are going to enable, but also possibly be a barrier to them achieving that behavior ongoing. So there's a lot of behavior change in this, right? And so if we want to round up that ecosystem, we've got the training stimulus, we've got nutrition, we've got the recovery and sleep, stress and hormones, but also we have those psychosocial factors that we need to consider for the consistency and the capacity of someone to keep doing that behavior. The way I see it too, I think sometimes this is drawn as a hierarchy of, the training stimulus is the most important, then the nutrition, then all these things. I really urge you to see this more as a web where it is all interconnected. They're all relating to each other, and we need to pay attention to every single piece of that web. And if one part of the web is lacking, it has the ability to take the whole thing down. And so instead of it going, oh, well, I've nailed these two things, it's okay that this one's at the top of the hierarchy in terms of the smallest component. If we miss out on that, it's fine. And to an extent, that is correct. But if we're actually looking at the whole person, we need to appreciate that, because it is always fluctuating and changing in their environment, their training, and also the demands within their life, if we consider it more as a web, we pay attention to all the opportunities and all the, risks of that not being achieved, rather than it being just oh, well, we've nailed the key things, you'll be fine. And our unique position, I feel like, as nutritionists and dietitians, is really related to that. It's our ability to have that behavior change lens and that ability to consider the whole person and that understanding within all of that, because nutrition has this really cool ability to give us clues on all their well-being areas, but also all their well-being areas can give us clues on their nutrition. We also see clients quite frequently. So we're holding those coaching conversations. We have training in motivational interviewing, that behavior change principles, but also hopefully we're all gathering longitudinal data around someone's sleep, energy levels, appetite, recovery, soreness, menstrual cycle, libido, all these types of things that can not only give us clues, but also give us an indication of what we need to pass on to other providers, or when to refer on to other providers as well, which will be a key part of this chat. So let's start with training stimulus, right? And I think this is a really interesting piece, because sometimes I find, particularly if you're recently graduated, you might hold off on asking about this at all, in the fear of going outside your lane or outside of the scope of your practice. And absolutely, prescription, particularly if you like me and only did nutrition and dietetics degree. I'm not talking about you special people that did double degrees in exercise and also nutrition. That is excellent. And you can absolutely go forth and conquer with your exercise advice plus nutrition. But I guess the big thing is, you don't need to program, and you shouldn't if you're not trained or accredited, but you do need to recognize signs, symptoms of both ensuring adequate stimulus for them to achieve their goal, but also signs and symptoms that something may actually be awry and needing additional support, and where to send them to. So in terms of interpreting the data, I think that's a really important piece of this as well, where, fatigue, for example, we might see and hear signs of fatigue based around reports from that individual or screening questions we might be doing. But we also need to be able to interpret the training load data to ensure that we're aware of, is this an overtraining concern, or is it under recovery, or is it maybe a bit of both? And our overall knowledge around training is really, really important to go alongside our nutrition knowledge and expertise as well. Um, ways that you might ask that is walk me through an average training week. What does it look like? How long are the sessions? Talk me through the intensity. Can you tell me how you feel during those sessions or after those sessions? Get an idea of how they're feeling around them, but also what they are doing in terms of duration, intensity, and also, I guess, really making sure that they're not only doing frequent the sessions to have that trigger, but there's also the presence of things like progressive overload. So if someone comes to me and they're like, just, oh yeah, I do this every week and it's the same every week, that's a flag for me to be like, okay, well, yes, you're doing the training. Yes, there is some stimulus, but are we doing the type of training, the overload in training and that progressive planning to actually ensure that we're able to achieve the goal that you've come to me to achieve? And we can do the nutrition bit, but we might need some additional help to ensure that we're doing the exercise bit well. Maybe they've come to you and they give you an idea of their week and there's a really high volume, but it's actually really low intensity, low quality, or their selection of sessions is very much, I mainly do cardio, but I also just do light weights because I'm worried about getting too bulky. So maybe it's the selection of that exercise that's going to be the limiting factor, not actually the nutrition. Maybe they're always fatigued, always sore, and you've ticked off everything to do with nutrition, but you need some additional help and resourcing for the exercise bit to really navigate where that's coming from and what's going on there. So we need to know, depending on what we hear when we go through the average training week, and if someone's come to you with set performance goals or strength, power, lean mass gains goals, it's really important we don't just hold the space of, well, this is what we need to do nutrition-wise to achieve that. Off you go. It's like, no, actually, all these factors in this web are going to enable you to achieve that lean mass or strength-based goal. Let's see where you are in all those areas. And nutrition-wise, we've got that. But also I'll know where those other opportunities or gaps are in opportunities to be able to support you in what next for that as well, so that you're really meeting them where they're at rather than just prescribing and being that, expert just in the nutrition section, because they also need to be the expert in their life. So we need to know when to refer. We need to know when to focus on nutrition, but we also need to know when to focus more on well-being or scaling back and really enabling behavior. So I guess that brings me nicely to things like sleep. If you're a practitioner that's not currently bringing sleep into conversation, I would highly encourage you to bring that into whether you're doing screening, whether you're doing your initial sessions, however you may collect information about your clients or your athletes at the moment. Sleep needs to be a component of that. You don't need to be a sleep expert to discuss things like sleep. It doesn't need to be too much. You really want to get an idea of the hours they're having per night, the routine and structural consistency of those hours, but also really easy screening questions like, do you wake feeling refreshed? Do you go to sleep easily? Do you feel like you sleep well, soundly? All those types of things. So we're looking for flags of poor sleep quality, but we're also looking for adequate hours to enable our body to adapt, to grow, to progress. Because sleep is when the magic happens. So if that's a limiting factor, then it may be that, okay, now is not necessarily our time to focus on nutrition. We actually need to tick this off first and let's just focus on this, depending on their overall capacity to make change. Sometimes we do have to prioritize away from nutrition to enable nutrition later. And it's really swallowing our pride to enable that as well. So what's in our scope when it comes to sleep? That's probably important to note. We can absolutely talk through the nutrition and sleep relationships. So what can we do nutrition-wise to improve sleep quality, improve feelings of wakefulness, in the morning, energy level stuff. We can talk about basic sleep hygiene strategies. And we can also make sure that with all that in mind, we know when to refer to a GP so they can get referral to a sleep specialist. So, if you are lucky enough to work alongside a sports scientist within your role or within your group that you're in, then sports scientists can be really well placed here to also do sleep studies, investigations, and support your athletes in that space as well, particularly in the athlete space. So, I'm very fortunate that I do hold sleep conversations, but I also refer very quickly to our medical team within the professional sports space to enable them to look deeper into sleep quality, sleep hygiene, and other strategies that may be needed there, so that I'm not just going, you're fatigued, eat more, or you're fatigued, let's eat more frequently. It's like, you're fatigued, let's look at the root cause of that and make sure that we're kind of adjusting based around you and everything that's going on in your life, not just the nutrition component that may play a part in that fatigue level. The other piece within these considerations is stress and hormones. So I won't dig too deep in this, but I think what we need to make sure we're considering with our clients is when we're getting to know them, we're also getting to know where they are in their life at the moment and all the different sources, I guess, of stress. And it's not just important to know how they're feeling mentally in that moment in time, but also if they feel like they're coping. So someone may actually be having really high stress levels, for example, at the moment, but feel like they're coping really well with that. In the same time, they might have quite low stress levels at the moment, but not be coping. We need to consider the compounding effects of stress for the main reason that things like exercise is a stress on the body. So when we're looking at achieving a performance-based goal, strength-based goal, like the conversation today, or increases in muscle mass and all these adaptations we're looking for, we need to consider if stress is managed well for progress. Because if we continually add stress onto the body, we're going to have a situation, and there's lots of different situations that it can occur where we don't get that progress, we don't get that adaptation, and it has nothing to do with things like their training and nutrition per se, but it has everything to do with the stress on their body, and that's led to things like overreaching. The other piece to this, I guess, is the hormonal component of this. Say you've got stress on the body from training, you've got high stress levels in life, and you also then add on underfueling in the female or male athlete, you have a situation where you actually remove that anabolic environment due to lowering of hormonal profiles. So in the female, that might look like a pause in menses where we have primary or secondary amenorrhea. And then in the males, we might have lowered libido, reduced frequency of morning erection of a morning. That sentence didn't make sense. Reduced frequency of morning erections alongside that lower libido. And that's related to reductions in testosterone, which we need for that anabolic environment. But also we need an energy availability piece to achieve increases in muscle mass and strength. So there's lots of compounding factors there to consider. And it's just not a matter of going, I've ticked off the protein, I've ticked off the energy, and away we go. It's like really making sure we're asking enough questions and we're seeking that curiosity and context to meet that person to enable that goal rather than just focusing on our lane, if you like. So clues around like the stress and hormonal profile. Obviously, you've got different things you might be asking around low energy availability flags, both subjectively and also clinically. But you also might see things like appetite dysregulation, high cravings of, those comfort foods, hyperpalative foods. Digestive issues is a really, really important one, which you might have included in your low energy availability screening that you're already doing, but really important that that is at the forefront of other conversations as well, because it can be a sign of underfueling and also a sign of high stress or anxiety. There's a very high connector between the brain and the gut, as we're all aware, and that is one way that it does show up is, in those irritable bowel type symptoms as an example. They might be doing everything well, but still experiencing really slow or poor recovery. But also a really telling thing is like loss of enjoyment or motivation around their training. And it's always a really big flag for me too when I sense that within our screening or our conversations that we're having with clients as well. So the practical considerations around the stress and hormonal piece, obviously, one of the big things that we talk about quite often is adequate energy availability is really key there to help manage that. There's the real consideration in our role of like, well, what's our controllables alongside your client and what's our uncontrollables? And sometimes there are stresses in their life, in their sport that you can't control. So it's about finding a positive sense of control with your client of like, well, what can we do to try and manage that stress on the body in a real positive sense rather than going, oh, well, no point, we're not going to achieve it right now. So achieving adequate and really high energy availability is excellent and a really nice step you can do. Also, improving carbohydrate availability around training sessions can be really, really positive. And a thing that I repeat often is giving people permission to scale back their food decisions and food options and behaviors based around their capacity, both mentally, physically, and environmentally in that moment in time. So if you've got someone in a really high stress state, maybe they're really, they've got really low time availability, maybe they've got really low capacity mentally as well. You could have the best meal plan in the world. You could have the most elite meal plan that you've ever seen and it ticks every single box, but it's completely useless because they can't translate it into their life in that moment in time. So I think really push back on that. Well, if I give people all the information, then they'll do it. Push back on that because, yes, that science is so important, but that ability to eat and make those behavior actions is a behavior that we need to enable. And we need to give permission and options for the plan A, but also the plan B, plan C, plan D, and a whole lot of compassion within that to enable that to happen. So really getting back to the basics at times, but also enabling that decision and that resilience in decision for them as well. To just an awareness of time because turns out I can chat, and I want to leave time for questions. To bring it all together, I guess the big thing that we need to consider is what is your current screening like with your clients, with your athletes? What are you currently screening for? Is it only for the clinical side of nutrition, for the data, for the background conditions, all those types of things? Or are you screening for the enablers and barriers within those people's lives to ensure that you're meeting them where you're at? And I think like that's something that we've been working on for many years at Compeat and something we're really, really proud of now having built. But it did take a lot of time, a lot of discovery, and something that we now find is so, so valuable for those we work with. But we need to ensure that we are assessing and we're having conversations, things that aren't in our nutrition scope per se, but absolutely in the people scope to ensure that we're looking at the stimulus if that's what they're coming in for and that's their goal. And we need to consider how we can ensure that they achieve that. We need to look at their sleep and recovery, their stress, but also their consistency and their overall capacity and barriers within their life to achieve consistent actions when it comes to like that training, but also the nutrition. And we need to build a network. So if you are someone who works on your own or works only with dietitians, I urge you to make sure that we are branching out. We have a really strong network of referral with people that can help with the training side, but also the medical side for any flags that do become apparent in our clients when we're chatting through with them. So collaboration isn't scope creep. It's a really, really crucial part of who we are, but also how we do our role. And we want to ensure that we're not just like practitioner centered and going, I'm the dietitian, I will control this. It's like, if I am truly client or athlete centered, what is the best thing for them? Sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it has nothing to do with nutrition. And they're doing all their nutrition right. And you have to swallow your pride to refer them on to someone else and be okay with them graduating from you or not being ready to see you yet either. And it's about really enabling that within your client so that they can absolutely achieve who they want to be, even if it's sometimes with nutrition, sometimes not, or maybe it's a bit of everything. So I hope that has helped kind of see the whole picture, the very multidisciplinary piece of achieving increases in lean mass, but also strength and power and all the things that come with that. If we're looking at body composition as a whole and where performance sits in relation to body composition, the data is still really, I guess, not necessarily like it's relational. So But we do see some really positive studies that lean mass is connected to performance outcome because we get the power from it. And if we look at, power versus weight or weight, that is what we're looking for. So if we are wanting to change body composition, I urge you to focus on the lean mass more than the body fat percentage, because that's where the data sits in how it's, I guess, how it relates to performance and also injury risk and all those types of things. So it's a really critical part of who we are and how we might be able to help individual come through athletes, but also squads and organizations. So thank you so much for joining, everyone.